Naveen, are we ready for the recap?
Yes, sir, we are.
Yes.
Um, Nidal and Sumaya, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please go ahead.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. This is Nidal Ahmed, and I'll be presenting this recap summary of yesterday's previous class. But before that, let's recap the one which we had prior to that class, and in which we discussed power versus authority. In this quick recap, I'll be covering that power is the ability of a person to exert influence on other people, whereas authority is the legal right of a person to give orders and take decisions. Now, under power, we discuss different types of power. The broader classification of powers, which says that the personal power and positional powers. Within personal powers, we had expert and reverent power, and within positional power, we discussed reward power and coercive power. And the keynote was this, that a person may require all the positional powers, but a mature person will get things done using personal powers. Now let's get along to the summary which I am concerned with. In the previous class, ma'am discussed two views of formal authority. So the class before that we discussed power in detail. Now in this class we discussed the authority, in which we started with the two views of formal authority. The first one is classical view. Now the classical view says that the authority and command is established from top to bottom hierarchy in such a way that the subordinates acknowledge the position of their boss, their superior, and so on, and they have to obey their command willingly or otherwise. So the classical view says that transferring the power and authority from top level to each bottom down. Now the other view of formal authority or the acceptance view, the basis of authority says that the basis of authority is how much a person will comply to command, will comply to the command will depend upon how well the subordinate is receiving the command from their superior authority. It was Chester Bernard actually who emphasized on acceptance view of authority, that the exercise of authority and power depends more upon the subordinate than the boss himself. That is the willingness or reluctance with which the subordinate may listen to the command that matters more. So actually, authority is being exercised from bottom to top level. So now the question arises that how to make the subordinate be more willing to accept and obey the command. Maybe through nurturing behavior, cordial attitude while transferring command. These are the managerial skills of the superior, or you may say the human skills. Well, fortunately, Chester Bernard has given us four specific conditions under which a person will comply with the higher authority, fortunately or unfortunately. So these well-defined conditions are, all these conditions should be met all together, and these conditions are number one, understanding the communication easy enough to follow and comply with something. One must clearly understand and comprehend what is being said to him, right? And the second condition is being consistent with the organizational goals. So when the employee is well versed, if the employee is well versed with the organizational goals and he understands the significance of the command being given to him, and what is his role in achieving these organizational goals, it is more likely that he will comply if he is consistent with the organizational goals. And the third condition is that the compatibility with his personal values and interests. So, see, if the subordinate feels that his personal values are not being compromised and that his interests are being satisfied, so he would be more willing to follow command. And lastly, fourth condition is mentally and physically able to comply with it, to comply with the command. So this needs no explanation, that he should be physically and mentally able to comply with the command. That is it. Now the acceptance view, sir further clarified that classical view can be seen as a hard and fast authority or whiplashing their commands onto the people whether they like it or not. For example, the early monarchs calling themselves vicegerents of God to make people obey them. And now the acceptance view, sir said, let us, with the aid of an example, sir said, if he gives a command to conduct the class at 2 a.m. in the morning, how many students will be willing to comply? The level of acceptance may not be the same, and in fact, it will not be the same. So order should be within the zone of acceptance of the subordinate. So this is the persuasive area of acceptance. Now, so this was realized, and actually this was realized in given by Chester Bernard and Mary Parkett Foley. In actuality, the power lies that in actuality, the power rests with the subordinate, whether they are willing to accept the command or not. So order should be within the zone of acceptance of the subordinate, or termed as persuasive area of acceptance. Now the next thing that we discussed was the line authority versus staff authority. Line authority works in a line, and the staff authority feeds in between through the line. Then ma'am give the example to clarify what is line managers, line authority and staff authority. So the line authority is that let us in our department of MBA, the chairman and dean can be considered as line authority, since they are responsible to meet the organizational goals. And the staff authority could be the office in charge of dean and manager chairperson, providing services like counseling, advice, technical expertise to the line managers so that they can work better. Further, line managers attempt to create value, whereas the staff managers focuses on preserving that value. And the idea is that the line manager may take help from the staff manager. So the staff manager suggests what to do and what can be done, but the final authority lies within the line managers who shall be taking the decision. So in any organization, managers and staff managers both are equally important. So to reiterate, the line authority is directly responsible for achieving our organizational goals, represented by the standard chain of command, creates value, and finally decides. And whereas the staff authority, they provide technical expertise, services, counsel, advice to line managers, and they protect value and offer advice through research, analysis, and so on. Now, at times there could be a conflict between line managers and staff managers. So, for example, line managers may think that they are doing the job of a staff managers, and sometimes the staff managers think that they are doing the job of the line managers. So following are the reasons of conflict between the line managers and the staff managers. Let's have a look at them. The staff managers happens to be younger. See, the first reason is the staff managers happens to be younger, though they are more educated or maybe more skilled. But and the line managers who happens to be older and much more experienced, they tend to dislike the advice of staff managers. This could be the reason of the conflict. Another is that line managers see staff managers as too ambitious and always trying to prove themselves. Also, line managers feel that they are stepping into their periphery and their zone of command. And the third reason of the conflict could be that the line managers even feel that the staff managers do not give sound advice or useful advices. And the last reason could be that from the staff manager side, that the staff managers feel that the line managers do not give them enough authority and credibility, enough credit, and they are reluctant to implement new ideas simply because they are less flexible and boneheaded. With that, I will conclude my summary. Thank you for listening. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Okay. Next, please.
The class was started by discussing two views of formal authority. The first question arises whenever we get an order that who gives you the right to tell me what to do? This familiar question implies that before we comply with an instruction, we must be satisfied that the person issuing it has the right to do so. There are two major competing views of formal authority in the organization: a classical view and the acceptance view. Classical view. This is known as the top-down authority, when the authority flows from top level to bottom level, like from the CEO of the company and the Prime Minister of the country. Every subordinate accepts this authority and obeys instructions issued by the superiors. Acceptance view. It is known as the bottom-up authority. It is based on the premise that authority doesn't flow from top to bottom, but from bottom to top. It implies that superiors can exercise authority only if it is accepted by the subordinates. Chester Bernard supported this theory and gave four conditions under which a person will comply with higher authority. First, understanding the communication. Second, consistent with the organizational goals. Third, compatible with his personal values and interests. Fourth, mentally and physically able to comply with it. Then we move forward and discussed line and staff authority. Managers of lines authority are those people in the organization who are directly responsible for achieving the organizational goal. Line authority is represented by the standard chain of command, starting from board of directors and extending down activities of the organization that are carried out. Line authority is based primarily on legitimate power. They attempt to create values. Any decision in the organization would be taken by the line managers. Staff authority. Staff authority belongs to those individual groups in an organization who provide services and advice to line managers. Staff managers provide line managers in planning advice through research analysis and policy and options development. And staff managers can also assist in policy implementation, monitoring and controlling in financial matters and in legal matters. Staff manager protects and preserves the value of organization. They are often considered as a more valuable asset of an organization. And then we discussed line staff conflict. There is frequent conflict between line and staff managers. It occurs when line and staff representatives disagree over issue of substance in their working relationships. More specifically, the conflict occurs because staff tends to be more educated, of a higher social staff, and more ambitious and restless. And second, the older and more experienced line managers sometimes dislikes taking advice from staff managers. Line managers tend to view staff as an agent on trial who constantly prove themselves. Line manager frequently feels that staff is encroaching on their duties and prerogatives. Line manager believes that staff doesn't give sound advice, steals credit, and fails to see whole picture. Staff views line managers as bullheaded who do not give them enough authority and resist new ideas. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Sumaya and Nidal, for doing a good job. As regards Nidal,
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, sir.
yes,
Sir, can I also represent? Today is also my turn.
Arafat, were you present in the previous class?
No, ma'am. I was not present in previous class.
No, I am saying, did you attend the previous class?
Yes, ma'am.
Acha, because I think I called out your name and maybe you were not there. So that is why we assigned today's recap to Sumaya.
No, ma'am. I was present in the class. So
Acha.
I also prepared for it.
Okay. We already have 2 presentations. So can you please present tomorrow? Is it possible?
Ma'am, no problem. But I also prepared for it. Only for I will take 4 to 5 minutes. Can I represent?
So what do you suggest?
okay, let him give him a chance.
Okay, Arafat, you may go. Please start, Arafat. Okay, please start.
Okay, ma'am. Assalamu alaikum, all of you. I am Muhammad Arafat, and I am here to represent the recap of previous class. In previous class, we discussed the 2 views of formal authority. First one is classical view, and second one is acceptance view. So, Authority. Authority is the right to give order, command, and to make decision through which to get the things done. In classical view of authority, the authority flows from top to bottom through the various level of hierarchy, and we can say that it flows from the board of director to managing director to general manager to supervisor, then finally to workers. So basically, this is the process of authority in classical view. The classical view of authority clearly defines the position of the job and the task, and position holder has to achieve the goals through order to be given to the subordinators. An acceptance view of authority, which is totally opposite to the classical view, which emanates the bottom to up approach in terms of authority. And Chester Bernard was one of the early proponents of this theory. Chester Bernard viewed authority as existent when subordinates are willing to accept it. If the subordinate do not accept the authority, so the manager loses the right to give order. And Bernard also argued for the order to be carried out, they must lie within the subordinate zone of acceptance, and also describe the zone of acceptance through the 4 points which are subjected to be satisfied. First one is he is fully understand the communication. Second one, consistent with the organizational goals. Third one is compatible with the personal value and interest. And last one is mentally and physically able to comply with it. And after that, we learn the line and staff authority. Line authority are those persons in an organization who are responsible for achieving the organizational goals, and it is primarily based on legitimate power. Staff authority are those people in the organization who are responsible for providing the technical expertise, services, counseling, advices, and many more. And we differentiate these two with the help of example that in our department chairman considered as a line authority because he enjoys the legitimate power and responsible for achieving goal. And a staff manager could be the office in charge of the chairman office who is providing services, counseling, advices to the chairman. So line manager attempt to create the goals and staff manager helps in the achieve that goal, and both are equally valuable for an organization. And at the last, we learn the conflict between the line and the staff authority. The conflict between these two can be arise in many circumstances due to certain reason. Lack of accountability between these two, such as the lack of accountability between these two, inappropriate demarcation between the line and staff, lesser burden on either of the authority, dilution of the authority, and many more. That's all, sir, from my side. Thank you.
So maybe please confirm the name of the presenters for tomorrow. Siddhant, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Siddhant. And Khan Mohammed Khalid? Nahid Rafi? Abdul Wahab? Albab? Munawwir? Muhammad Yunus? Rishabh Bhardwaj? Rishabh Bhardwaj, I see you on the list. Can you please respond?
Ma'am, Abdul Wahab.
Rishabh.
Hello, ma'am.
Acha, Abdul Wahab, you are there?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm
Abdul
trying
Wahab,
to on my mic.
Okay.
Technical problem is on my.
Okay, Abdul Wahab, so you and Siddhant Shekhar shall present the recap on the next class.
Okay, fine. Ma'am.
Okay, please.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we have listened to 3 recaps today. Starting with Nidal. Overall, you did a reasonably good job. But earlier also, Dr. Zareen has pointed out that you don't need to repeat everything that is being discussed in the class. Okay. So perhaps your recap became a bit longish, and there were some repeat in between that you ended up consuming more time than. And perhaps next time when you make a presentation, you can make an attempt to to the written text.
Okay, sir.
Reading support. Sumaya, I think you demonstrated good command over language. Maybe next time when you make a presentation, try to be more forceful in your delivery, and that will make a better impact overall you did
Sure, sir. Very well.
be more qualitatively better in terms of the language flow. So there were some language slips here and there. So those were the concern areas. So work on those areas. Now coming to the content, I have roughly around 25 odd minutes. So maybe initially I will spend some time on the issue of this line and staff that we are discussing, and I will add some additional inputs discussion. Dr. Zareen has already pointed out the conflicts and why these conflicts are there. Let me ask with a basic question as to why do we need staff? Now we need actually staff for two reasons. And those two reasons are, one, the size, the volume of the work, and the second, the expertise. Why staff is required. Now, when I was holding the responsibility of the chairperson of the department, I was also receiving requests for appointment. For example, many times the students would send me a message, sir, we want to see you in this connection and all that. But the number of requests were not so heavy that I could not handle it on my own. Now, if you compare the chairman's role with that of the vice chancellor of the university, now you can imagine how many requests the vice chancellor would get for appointment. Naturally, they will be much more in comparison to the chairperson of the department. The point is that the vice chancellor, the nature of his exposure, the nature of his work demand is such that the vice chancellor may require the support of somebody who can maintain the diary for him, who can maintain the record of appointment, who can prioritize, who can, in consultation with the vice chancellor, decide who has to be given appointment and who may have to be denied the appointment. So the Vice Chancellor may require the services of a personal staff. And that is why in the Vice Chancellor's office, you have a personal secretary who maintains diary on behalf of the Vice Chancellor. So that is one reason. So we should engage staff only when that we have to. Am I audible?
Yes, sir,
Yes,
you're audible.
I'm very sorry because there was some connectivity issue. I got disconnected. So please confirm the point that I was discussing, whether we left at that point only. So I was talking about the size, the volume of work, which may necessitate a use of the staff people. And I gave you the example of the chairperson of the department vis-a-vis the vice chancellor of the university. Are you with me on that account? Can somebody confirm? Is that the point that we reached up to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I was talking about the first point, and that is the volume, the size of the work. Now, the second reason why do we employ staff is assistance or expert support. Now, when do we need the services of an expert? Now, I recall my early days when I was doing my summer training in Tomco, which was a company of Tata's. It was called Tata Oil Mills Limited. And I was placed in the headquarter for some time, and then I was posted in the sales office. So in the sales office, there was a person who was called a statistician, and his job was to keep a record of the sales as it is happening in various regions. Now he would maintain record, and he would, based on that, make an assessment in which area which product is selling better, in which area which product is not doing that well. So they had a star product which was their soap, OK soap, and they were very concerned about, because this was their major revenue earner at that point of time. So they used to maintain a record of this, especially, and then based on that, this statistician used to advise the line managers, the sales managers primarily, as to, in your let us say territory, the sale of this particular product is doing good, and maybe you have to focus a bit more on this particular product which is not doing well in your area. Find out the reasons and all that. So his role was primarily to give additional inputs to the sales managers, who were primarily responsible for sales, but his job was to provide them additional data support based on the record that it has compiled. Now, this role may get extended in variety of situations. In fact, now information technology has become an organized kind of discipline in all organizations, and there are people who have become expert of analyzing information. Now, these, as you all know, that information is the basic input for decision making. So, if somebody analyzes the information and shares it with the line managers, naturally they will have some additional inputs based on which they can, take better qualitative decisions. So, do you think we need to employ experts, such experts? And if we employ them, how do we integrate them in the decision making? Does it mean that now sales manager doesn't have to think as to how I should increase sales in my area, because he has been getting advice from some expert who is information expert primarily? What do you think should be the relation between the line manager, in this case, for example, sales manager of a particular territory, vis-a-vis the expert who is providing him information? Should sales manager follow the advice of the expert?
Yes, sir.
And what is the reason for it? Why do you think that the expert's advice should be taken into consideration?
Sir, the expert is having some additional information and which cannot be collected by the sales manager at that time. So if he'll get some advice of statistics, he'll perform better in his job.
Very true. So with his advice also being incorporated into the decision making, it is likely that the decision making will be qualitatively better. So now these experts, now I have given you just one class of expert, people who are expert in collecting information, analyzing information, putting it in a trend, and then sharing it with the line managers. Now, in certain cases, this advice is of prime importance, and the line managers may actually not be most equipped persons to handle certain situations. Like, for example, suppose we have this a minority case going on in the Supreme Court, and our university is contesting that, and the major bone of contention is that the university's point of view is that ours is a minority institution. It has been established not through governmental support but through community support, and because of that we should be declared as minority institutions. And naturally the government of India has the privileges which has been laid down for minority institutions. So once the university is classed as minority institution, there will be certain relaxations in the admission policies and all. But that is not the point. The point is, now who is responsible for fighting it out in the court? Naturally, if you look at the university's hierarchy, ultimately it is the vice chancellor's job. But do you think vice chancellor is fully competent to handle such a situation? Will he not need the support or the advice from the legal experts? And those legal experts may be insiders. So we have, for example, our legal section in the university, which is headed by a joint registrar who himself happens to be a person with legal background. So should the vice chancellor not seek advice from the legal internal team? And in case the internal legal team's competence is not adequate, should he not also seek advice from outside experts? So the university ends up engaging best of the lawyers for seeking advice as to how we can contest this matter in the court in the right earnest. So there are some knotty issues, legal issues, on which advice is required. And in that case, the expert's role becomes very important. Even in routine matters, for example, many of you will take up assignments in different functional areas. For example, most likely many of you will, if you get into corporate kind of job, you will take up marketing. And you will grow in that hierarchy, starting with maybe sales manager of a particular territory. You will grow and you will become marketing manager, you will become vice president marketing. So like for example, my student Anas Abdul Wajid of 1997 batch, now he is heading the marketing function of Max Healthcare. So the point is that most of you will take up a particular functional area and you will grow in that functional area. Now there are certain roles which all functional areas require, for which you may require services of other experts. For example, suppose you have to hire a person in your team. Should you not take help of HR manager? If you require an additional team member in your team, how should you go about it? Should you just pick up a person and say, come and join? Or there has to be an elaborate process of appointment of, let us say, a sales manager of a particular territory. What do you think? As a functional manager, should you have full freedom to select a person, or should you seek the advice of people who are, let us say, experts in psychometric testing, for example, or preliminary scrutiny of the candidates? How should we go about selecting a person if we happen to be a marketing manager? Should it be 100% our decision?
So we should take in the advice of the HR manager who is expert of recruitment.
Exactly. That is what my point is. So there are certain roles in which we require help of an expert. In this case, the expert is the HR manager, because maybe he is doing this job over a period of time and he has become an expert in shortlisting the candidates. Maybe he does some kind of psychometric testing. Based on that, he can shortlist the candidates. But I hope all of you will appreciate that final decision to select a person has to be done by the line manager. Because ultimately the person has to work with him and deliver the goods in his functional area. So in this also you will see that in all business decisions now there is a need to get inputs from experts, and these experts actually at times may try to exert more influence than required. And whenever that happens, a conflict situation may arise. And that is what Dr. Zareen was discussing with you in the previous class, the sources of conflict between line and staff. Generally, the advice which is given for advice is that you take it or leave it. So, for example, if you come to me for seeking career guidance and you have your ideas and you seek my advice, I should give it in the spirit that you can take it or you can leave it. I may say, okay, based on my assessment, it appears that you may be good if you take up a government job. But I cannot enforce my decision on you. I have to, as an expert, only give you an option. Okay, this is my assessment. Ultimately, your career is your career. I cannot force my decisions on you. But generally, this doesn't happen in businesses, and experts, because of their unique expertise, they end up, pushing down decisions more than they should, and this creates conflicts. Now, what should be the way out? Is there a way out? How can we integrate the advice of the expert yet retain the independence of the line managers, so that they don't feel that their turf is being encroached by experts? Is there a way out? I have already told you about the size. The first, which is easy. But integrating experts in your system is a tough job, because experts often have their vanity also, because they feel that they are experts in their area. So, for example, if you hire a person like Harish Salve, who is a legal luminary and a very experienced lawyer in the Supreme Court, and he gives you certain advice, first you will have to pay for it. And when you pay for it, should you ignore it? Or can you afford to ignore the advice. So this is the, I wanted to, I mean, there is no easy answer to this question, but staff and line conflict becomes a real conflict when experts try to exert too much and the line managers feel that our freedom is being compromised, our area of responsibility is being encroached upon by experts, and they are advising too much. If we can control this tendency in the organizations, line and staff conflicts would not be there. Otherwise, it will always be a kind of messy situation where experts will say, okay, we are giving a sound advice, and line managers will say, no, you give advice, but ultimately I will decide finally what has to be done. And these are the sources of conflict, which I wanted you to appreciate. There are, as I said, no easy answers to these questions, but somehow we have to work as integrated unit so that expert as also the line manager, the functional manager retain their independence and yet work for the betterment of the organization. Thank you very much.
Sir, can we just outsource
Bilal, you may speak first.
sir, can we just outsource the expertise so that the interference of the expert is less in the organization?
Yes, that is possible in some cases, but again, that's a very situation specific thing. For example, in the university's case, for example, there are hundreds of cases which are, going on. Some related to some conflicts, maybe some employee feels that he deserves another raise, or he has not been given the pay raise at the right time and all that. Now, for that, you need to have an internal in-house team because they are in your greater control. Now, depending on the need, suppose now this case goes to High Court and the employee decides to fight it out in the court. Naturally, there you will need to have an expert from outside also. You will have to engage a lawyer in the High Court. And the university generally has a standing counsel who fights on behalf of the university, such cases. So you have to have a combination of in-house and outside expert. But the point will always be there, how to extract maximum or best advice from the expert, yet retain the line manager's ability to the independence of the line manager. Yes, Rahul, you were saying something.
I think so.
Okay, thank you very much then. We'll call it a day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.